Time until years later that my dad, I left on a Tuesday. My dad fasted every Tuesday for the year I was gone. He fasted and prayed for me every Tuesday. And if it was God's will for me to make it, I would. But if it wasn't, I was ready to go to heaven. And that's about the way it is, you know. So how many veterans do we have here today? Oh, thank you all for your service. Thank you very much. The first story I'm going to say is, a lot of times, all servicemen or all have their stories, and God gave me these stories to share to other people to build up your faith. And prayer is a mighty tool that we have. And so the first story I'm going to tell is I named it Lost on Night Patrol. We didn't do much patrolling at night because usually so dark you couldn't see your hand in front of your face anyway. But this one time we needed to get into what they call a blocking position. There was going to be some activity going in some place, and they were hoping to drive the enemy maybe towards us. So we had to get into this position at night. And of all things, I happened to be the last guy in line. Our company usually consisted of about 105 guys. And as we were supposed to go up this, I knew we were going to be going up a ridge, and of course I couldn't always just walk, looking straight ahead, because never knew if enemy was going to be using this same trail. So I kind of would look backwards a little bit. Well, when you're walking like this, you're not staying up with the rest of the guys. Not a good thing. I got to the top of the ridge, and I said the guy's name in front of me, Mike. No answer. I guess I must have really got behind. So I go down the trail a little bit further and I say, Mike. No answer. I go, wow, they couldn't have got that far ahead of me. So I go down the trail further yet and I say, Mike. No answer. I'm going, oh, wait a minute here. I don't want to get lost out here. This is not a good thing. So I went back down the trail and I thought, well, I'll get back to right when I came up on top of the ridge, and they're going to miss me sooner or later, and I'll just crawl off to the side and they'll come back looking for me. Well, when I got back to where I thought where I had missed them, I kind of noticed, another trail going off this direction. Something told me, give it a try. Okay. So I go down the trail maybe 50 yards and I say, Mike. Yeah. And I go up to Mike and he says, what do you want? I says, did you miss me? He says, no, why? I says, I was lost, but now I am found. And so I want to really praise and thank God for that one time that I certainly did not want to be lost. The next story takes place in March of 1969. And this mission, we were out in the field only 6 days. And in those 6 days, it was a great change in our lives, because so many things happened. The only thing we knew, we were going to be choppered into this area to help an Alpha company that was in trouble, and they needed our company to come in and give them a hand. Excuse me. What we didn't know at that time, how many enemy soldiers were actually in this area. We found out later, because we captured some guys, and we found out later that there was approximately 2,000 regular North Vietnamese Army regulars in that area. And so there's 105 guys in the other company about. There was 105 in ours. So 200 against 2,000. We didn't know this, of course, at the time. Had we known it, we probably, none of us would have gone in there, including Alpha Company. But as we're being choppered in, and as we're, as we were being choppered in, we could see where we were going to be landing, kind of in a horseshoe, and this was all rice paddy here. And the helicopters called Cobra gunships were strafing the area around this horseshoe, and they were taking fire. And as we got down lower, we started taking enemy fire, a lot of enemy fire. But the choppers couldn't land, of course, in the rice paddy, so they hovered at about 4 feet, and we jumped in. Of course, we sank up into our knees in the rice paddies, and you would call, we were sitting ducks. So we were struggling to get, we decided to go to our right to get to, that was the closest land over there. And we were getting guys shot right away as soon as they were getting off the chopper. And so we were putting them back on the chopper right away. I'm sorry, I gotta. And we knew we had to get and start taking out these bunkers. So we managed to get to the jungle, and we started taking out these bunkers, and we kept losing guys. And getting guys wounded, but we were also taking out these bunkers because we had another bunch of choppers coming in with the rest of our company. And so we worked our way down this line, taking out these bunkers, and we kept also losing some of our guys too. And we finally got the other company, the rest of the company in, and it was getting later in the day, and so we figured, well, I guess maybe we better set up a night stand place here. So we, every night, dig that foxhole. And, boy, excuse me, I'm going to have to put a cough drop in. And as we set up that night, and we sent an ambush out of probably 5 or 6 guys down a trail, and they set some flares, trip wires across that had flares on them. And if an enemy would come by, of course, they tripped the flares, and you could see who they are, and you take out the enemy. But luckily that night, nothing happened. So the next morning, we were climbing. I was in the northern part of South Vietnam, a lot of hills, and we were climbing up this kind of an overgrown old terraced area, and we sat down to take a break, and I sat there, and I'm looking down the next terrace down, which was probably about 20 feet away, and then maybe a 4-foot drop. And boy, there was a fruit tree of some kind. And I figured, wow, hey, that would taste really good. So I'm going to go down there and get some of this fruit. God spoke to me. He says, no, you don't. It wasn't an audible voice. In my head, God speaks to us in many ways. Sit right where you are. It wasn't 5 seconds later, an enemy soldier comes walking right where that tree is. And I first, like, wow. So, and war is war, and, you hate to take a life, but that's what war is, It's not easy, but I'm sure if I'd have been down there, he'd have taken my life. But God had his protecting hand upon me once again. So we started moving again, and the point man and 2 or 3 other guys got over this stone wall, and all of a sudden the enemy opened up on them, and 2 of those guys lost their life instantly, and the 3rd guy was wounded. He made it back over the wall, but we never left anybody out in the field. It didn't matter how many guys it took. You just didn't leave anybody behind. And so we started shooting over the top of this wall and throwing some grenades, and we started taking the wall apart, and hopefully we could reach in and get guy, and drag him out. And that was just too much firepower coming at us. We couldn't get them, and so we called in the Cobra gunships again, and they just strafed that whole area in front of us, and we were able to get those guys out again. But now we got a problem. We got guys wounded. We got a couple guys that are passed away, and we needed to get a chopper in to get these guys out of there. That's awesome. That's not as easily done as we think it might be, because every time one of those Red Cross choppers with the big red crosses on them, they didn't carry any weapons on those helicopters. Well, that didn't mean nothing to the enemy. All that meant was they had a better target when they saw that red cross, and they couldn't land because there was too much firepower. So they took away. So we had to carry these guys with us, and we kept losing more guys all the time, but we just kept going. We had to hook up with this Alpha company because they were depending on us, and so we kept walking and one time we took a break, and we were sitting. Kind of 4 of us were in an area maybe about this far apart. We were sitting, and all of a sudden an RPG, that's a rocket-propelled grenade that the enemy shoots, came flying at us and hit right above our heads where we were sitting. And so we saw where it had come from, approximately across this rice paddy, so we all kind of opened up on it. Now, first of all, I forgot to say, one of our guys, we had some, hillbillies with us. They were from Kentucky and Tennessee, and this one, he jumps up and he yells, "You're not a very good shot, are you?" Yeah, Jerry. Yeah. Go ahead and yell and tell him that, okay? So we opened up on this area, and we never knew if we got the guy or not. But that's what happened. A lot of times you'd get sniped at, and you'd shoot over in that direction, and you never know if you got somebody or not. But anyway, we took off again, and we needed some resupply. We needed some food. We needed ammunition mostly, and we needed to get these guys out of here. But water was definitely the big thing. I had actually run out of water already, and when you're in a very dry, humid, hot jungle, we were really, really thirsty. And I remember they told us in survival school that you can pick up stones, pebbles, put them in your mouth and get some saliva going, so you can keep going. Yeah, that helped some. And we we had to find some water someplace, but that was impossible. That was on I think day 3 then. The lieutenant come up to me and he says, "Well, it's our platoon's time to walk point." He said, and it's, "Phil, you're going to walk point today." Oh, boy. Okay. He says, "Well, here's what we're going to do." So he takes his map and he says, "We're here. You got to get to over here." And we looked at the compass on there, and he gave me the compass. And so I had a compass. I pinned it on me, and I carried my M16 rifle in this hand and the machete in this hand, because we didn't want to walk any trails, because that would have been suicide. So I was cutting my way through whenever I had to get from point A to point B. And I know, I was just sweating like everything and no water. And I'm going, Lord, have your protecting hand upon me, because with this cutting, sometimes, they can hear you. And we had to keep our at night, when we had all these wounded guys with us, you had to keep them quiet somehow, because you didn't, they're in pain. And the medics did a great job of keeping them as quiet as they could, because a lot of times the enemy sometimes wasn't very far away, and if they heard you, they would be coming. And I made it to point B without any incident, and from there we still hadn't joined up with Alpha Company. There was just so many enemy soldiers in that area, and we kept losing. Our numbers were getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And so, funny, I think it was the next day, we were walking and somebody said, hey, somebody just spotted a rice paddy just off to the side a little bit, a small rice paddy. It's water. Stagnant water, but it's water. So 4 of us decided that we would go down to this rice paddy and fill a bunch of canteens up. Well, I traded my M16 off to a guy, and I took the M60 machine gun, and another guy, he took a radio, and then the other 2 guys carried all the canteens. Well, 2 guys went down into the rice paddy to fill the canteens up, and me and this other guy, we stayed up there. And there were some rocks pretty close by, some nice sized rocks. So that was a good thing, just in case. Well, these guys got the canteens filled up. I brought them on shore, and they're just putting all the covers on. And all of a sudden, someplace in the hillside over here, a machine gun opens up on us. And the guy next to me, he took a bullet right through his knee. And all of a sudden I felt some pain in my left hip, and I'm going, man, I think I'm hit too. And we crawled behind these rocks, and we got the wounded guy behind the rocks, and I took that 60 and I was just shooting the area up. Didn't know where the bullets were coming from. The guy got on the radio, called back and said, hey, we're getting shot at from such and such location. Could you send some artillery rounds into that area? And so that's what first they sent some smoke rounds to make sure it was the right area. You didn't want them rounds landing short and taking us out. And so, yep, they were right on. And some of these big guns, they're called 155s, is a big gun. They can shoot as far as 16 miles away. And so we called on them a lot to help us out. But anyway, I crawled behind this rock, and I'm going, man, my hip kind of burns here. And so I fatigue pockets, you got big pockets on the sides down here. And I kind of was feeling around there, and I always carried a little Instamatic camera along with me to take pictures, And so I pulled this camera right here out of my pocket. That bullet had gone in right here and came out right here. And when it exited, it went across the seat of my pants. It never touched my skin, but it burned a hole through my pants. So that is what you call God's protecting hand upon you. Amen. Thank you for everybody that was praying back home. So after all the artillery was hitting into the hillside, and we weren't getting any more fire, we took the wounded guy and the canteens, and boy, it sure felt good to get a drink of water. I always say, how much would have I paid for a drink of water during those almost 2 days with no water? I don't know what I would have paid, but I think it would have been a lot. Anyway, so we got that water. Okay, there's the guy. Now we need another chopper in to get this wound guy out because he was in a lot of pain. Well, okay, that means chopper comes in, enemy knows where you are. So we had a really great captain, and this was his second tour in Nam, and so he knew what we had to do. As soon as the chopper came in, we got the guy on, and this was always the thing we did the 6 days. You immediately took off in some direction. You didn't stay there because we knew the enemy was coming. And so we took off, and luckily we got the guy on, didn't get shot at. Wow, that was great. And so on day 5, then we managed to get to an area, and we were going to be crossing a river. Here we drank this swamp water, you might as well say, but it don't matter. Anyway, so we were kind of getting our company together, the guys that were left, and we started with 105, and I believe about that time we had about 60 left. The rest were either wounded or had been killed, and we were down to about 60. So as we got together, and I would say probably in an area about the size of the sanctuary, and everybody was discussing how we were going to go across the river and meet up hopefully with Alpha Company soon. As we were kind of lounging around there, all of a sudden, from the distance, you heard this dunk, dunk, dunk. And if you've been in a war place, you know that that's mortar rounds leaving the tubes. And it started raining mortars on us. I mean, it was devastating. Somehow they had that place zeroed in. And how they knew we were there at that time, we never did know. But it started raining mortars. And I remember running with all my might to get off this plateau-like thing that we were on. And another couple of my friends, they were running in front of me, and one of them jumped into you call them spider holes. It's actually a hole that the enemy has dug for a fighting position. But Vietnamese are pretty small little people, but he was already in this hole, and he said, "Phil, come on in here." So I don't know how I did. I squeezed in with him, and you could just feel the ground boom, 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 hitting where all of our guys were yet up on this plateau. And finally, the captain decided that during this time that he knew about where this was coming from, from the sound. So he got on the horn and called artillery, and they started pounding that whole area over there, and the rounds quit coming in. And then we went back up on that hill, and it was devastating. We had so many dead and wounded up there. It's hard to imagine something so terrible could happen. I remember taking this one guy off the hill, carrying him off. He was wounded really bad with a lot of shrapnel. And I was afraid we were going to get a ground attack about this same time. But luckily it never came. But I remember carrying this guy off, and I sat down by this tree, and I had him in my hands, and I knew he wasn't going to make it. He died in my arms. It was one of the strangest feelings I've ever had in my life. I actually could feel, I don't know how to explain it, I actually could feel this guy's life leave his body and go into my hands, my arms. It's hard to explain. It's really hard to explain. Well, we finally, there was a lot of guys dead and wounded. We got some choppers in. Luckily, we got choppers in, and we took all these guys out. We had 26 guys left. 10 of those were wounded, but not bad enough to leave the field. I was one of 16 that didn't get wounded. God is great. We knew for sure we got to get out of here, And finally, that same day, we moved out and we connected up with Alpha Company. Finally, we thought we were had it bad. Alpha Company went out with about 100 guys. When they joined us, they had 18 left. So we had 44 guys. And they said the next day, we're going to be getting out of there. Oh, thank you. So we dug in really deep that night. I think all you could see from the foxholes was just our heads sticking out because we for sure thought we were going to get hit that night, but we didn't. So the next day they said, okay, we need to get to a hillside over here where the choppers were going to come in to pick us up. It was probably about a mile away. So we made our way up there okay, only to find out when we got there that because we needed them choppers so quick, there was only 2 choppers coming. And each chopper, so we had 44 guys, so each chopper can only carry 8 guys. So that was 16 would have to leave, And so the first load took all the wounded people. And so they said, they kind of said, okay, this group is going to go out in the first load, this in the second, and well, I happened to be the third lift out, which was the last lift. And so when the choppers left, I looked at my watch. Okay, how long is it going to take them to get back here to get the rest of us out? They were taking them to the first LZ, which was a landing zone that had bunkers on it and medical help and all this kind of stuff, And I saw them coming back 20 minutes, okay? So they took another 16 out. That left 12 of us there. And I am praying, Lord, they see these choppers coming in, they went, they kept back, went. The enemy knows where we are for sure. And I'm praying, and finally, 20 minutes, no sooner. The choppers came back, and we piled on there as quick as we could, and as we were just lifting off, we probably were, I'm guessing, 50, 100 yards off. There in the distance is a wave of enemy troops coming towards us. All I could see was enemy from one side, on the side of this hill, coming towards us, and they opened up on us, and we opened up on them. The choppers had M60 machine guns on it, and everybody in the doorways was just shooting away. The choppers got up and shoo, down, and away we went. We got out of there. But we had definitely taken a bad beating that 6 days that we were in there. During that time, for my actions, I received the Bronze Star. So I just thank God that I made it out of there. But I feel always so bad about all of our guys that didn't make it. The next story I'm going to talk about is walking through a minefield. One day on another mission, lieutenant comes out to me and he says, and by this time I was a sergeant, and he said, today your squad is going to walk point. And I had a couple guys in the squad that always volunteered to walk point. Okay, good. That means, because you're sitting there, okay, I know this guy's married, and I know this one's got kids, and oh boy. And this guy, he's never walked point before. And so I says to the guy, who wants to walk point? And, I will. Guy said, okay, good. I said, I got to tell you something first. we are going to be going through a very heavily mined area. And he looks at me and says, maybe somebody else can walk point. And so, any volunteers? Of course, nobody volunteered. And finally, one of the guys says, "Hey, Sarge, why don't you walk point?" Well, I said, I should make my guys doing something that I wouldn't do myself. I was told later I shouldn't have walked point because of the knowledge I had to pass on to other guys. I shouldn't have walked point, but I prayed, Lord, you know what I need. You know what? Help me as I walk through this area, Lord, and be with me. And I said we usually walked, 10, 12 feet apart. And I said, now you tell everybody behind you to step exactly where you stepped. And so I prayed and I took off walking. You're not only looking for the enemy, but you're trying to see in the ground if you can see any prongs sticking up or anything, I'm here. I walked point. We didn't step on anything. So praise God again for his saving grace. Next one's called Down the Hill Bunker. We usually spend 3 weeks out in the field on patrol, and then you get to spend a week on a hill way out in no man's land. But it had a lot of good points of being on that hill. First of all, you took a shower. You had a 50-gallon barrel up on some stilts. You put water in it. Of course, it's hot. The water is going to warm up very quick, so you got to take a shower. Whew. You got to shave. You got to put some different clothes on maybe. And he had bunkers all the way around this hill and everything. And one day, somebody noticed some enemy movement over in the distance, And so we had artillery on that hill, so they kind of shot over in that direction. Anyway, we thought for sure we'd probably going to get hit that night. So they have on this hill, which wasn't real big, they had a trail that went down to a lower area. And that's where the resupply choppers would come in and drop off the water and ammunition and food and stuff like that. And between that place and the regular bunkers, there was a forward bunker. And so it was our turn again to go down there. So I took 6 guys. We went down to that bunker just before dark. And that bunker it was made out of sandbags, and it had sandbags probably about piled this high on the roof, so you could get behind to shoot. And it had a doorway on the side that went in, and there was actually some wooden bunks you could sleep in while a couple guys would watch out. And we got down there, and I knew it was the Lord again. The Lord says, nobody's going in that bunker tonight. You're all staying on top. So I told the guys, hey, nobody's going into the bunker tonight. We're all going to stay up on top here. Sure enough, sometime during the night, we started getting hit by automatic weapons fire and RPGs. And in fact, we felt our bunker get hit a couple of times. And so we got on the radio and said, hey, we got to get out of here. We're coming up the hill. You just didn't want to take off running because they didn't know if it was you or the enemy coming up the hill. So they said, okay. So they opened the wire up and we got in there, and they tried overrunning us that night, the enemy, but we held them off. And next day we went down to pick up weapons and different things like that. And as we got down to that downhill bunker, there an RPG round had gone straight through the doorway, right into where anybody in there would have been sleeping. But once again, God said, no, you don't have to. The next story takes place probably in May or June of '69. And we were on patrol, hadn't been shot at for about a week. Ooh, that felt good. And so we were kind of sitting around, taking a break, and eating our C rations, and all of a sudden, you heard that noise. Dunk, 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 ay. Incoming, I remember yelling, incoming. And I remember probably about 30 feet away, I remember walking by a depression in the ground that was probably about 3 feet deep, 6 feet wide, and 6 feet long. And so I grabbed my weapon and I started running for that. They always tell you not to go in a hole that's already there because it might be mined. It might be booby-trapped. But better than these mortars coming in out in the open and getting shot at there. So me and 6 other guys slid into this hole. And we had guys just laying in the open getting shot at and things. And so I come up out of that hole, and I was laying down some fire into where we were getting shot at from. And I went back down, and things were just happening so fast. And I got back up, and I started shooting again, and got back down. And these guys out there were trying to help guys get back into some cover. And the third time, I got up out of the hole like this, and a hand came up out of the hole, went like this. A bullet went through this guy's hand, right here. Went in there, came out over here. I got blood all over my face. I couldn't comprehend what actually happened. I slid back down in the hole, and I go what? And I says to this guy, I knew it was him because his hand was all messed up. I said, well, why did you do that? He says, well, I don't know. I said, you didn't do it the first time I got up? He says, no. Nothing said it, nothing prompted me to do it. I said, well, you didn't do it the second time I got up. He said the same thing, nothing prompted me to do it. He said, but that third time when you got up, something said, push Phil's head away. I knew it was God. There's no explanation to that. God had sent this guardian angel. The guy had only been with us 2 weeks. He was a medic. I didn't even know his first name. But anyway, so we needed to get some choppers in to get these guys all out of there. But wow, we were really getting hammered there. So we decided that we're going to dig in right in this area here. And we're going to bring the choppers in at night. What we were going to do was dig a small hole in the middle of our little encampment there, and kind of a blinking light. And then the choppers, which would be really high, would just whoosh, come right down onto that light. And so that's what they decided that they would do. And me and another buddy of mine, whose name was Phil, who actually, I live in Waupaca, he lives in Waupaca. We were actually drafted the same day, he was a farm boy, I was a farm boy. We went to Fort Campbell, Kentucky together, same squads in Kentucky, went to Fort Lewis, Washington for advanced training, put in the same platoon, the same squad, went to Vietnam, were put in the same platoon, the same squad. Anyway, we volunteered to take some guys and throw them on the chopper. Well, we did that, and the chopper started taking off, and then everything let loose. RPGs started coming in, small arms fire, mortars again, and I remember me and Phil rushing to get back to that hole, and all of a sudden there was an explosion behind us. And I remember being picked up off the ground and thrown a couple feet. And I'm laying there, and Phil comes crawling up to me. He says, "You okay?" I says, "Yeah." He says, "Well, I'm not." He said, I'm hit. Got some shrapnel. He had shrapnel in the back of his head, down his back. And so we crawled to that hole. And it was a good thing that we decided to volunteer because the guys that were in that hole were all wounded. Here, an enemy had snuck up and threw a grenade into that hole. And so we crawled in there, and I went for my weapon. It was useless. It was full of shrapnel, and there wasn't any good weapons, but there was a machine gun sitting up on top of the berm. And so I remember grabbing that machine gun and the enemy had to be close. And so I just remember my lieutenant says, you probably don't remember this because you were shooting that thing so fast, the barrels started turning red because I was shooting so many rounds out of it. Well, so then we had to get another chopper in to get these guys out. And this time it worked a lot better, but we knew we were in big trouble. We didn't know how many enemy were around us. But anyway, we at night, even in daytime, you couldn't get out of that hole, not even to relieve yourself because you'd have been shot. So we, at nighttime, they decided that the best thing to help us would be these C-130 planes, which is a big, like a cargo plane, but it was converted into a plane that had 2 miniguns on it that each shot 6,000 rounds a minute. And they would fly around our camp, dropping flares, big parachute flares that would be lit for quite a few minutes and come down. If they saw any, which they did, saw any enemy trying to sneak up, there was just a straight, every fifth bullet was a tracer, but it looked like one steady stream of tracers coming down. When one plane would have to leave because they're either out of ammunition or they were running low on fuel, another one would come. Same thing happened, another one would come. They flew all night protecting us. So, okay, we got to get out of there, and there's just too many enemy. And they said, well, if we bring in another bunch of people, another company, it's going to be the same thing. You're still going to be pinned down there because the enemy had us surrounded. So another night, and same thing, the choppers flew over like that. The big planes flew over with the flares and parachute flares and the machine guns just a rolling. Well, the next day, finally, a column of armored personnel carriers came and got us out of that position and took us to a safer area, to say. Okay. One more story here. There was a time we were out in the field on another mission, and I remember we were kind of walking, and all of a sudden we saw across a rice paddy a couple hundred yards away 5 enemy soldiers walking, and so everybody is opening up on them. Well, this new guy, he comes running up next to me, and this far from my ear, he opens up with his M16. I'm going, hi. Well, a couple of days later, that ear became infected, really bad. I couldn't even touch this little thing on the end here, and it just sent pain. Finally, the medic said, well, we're getting a chopper in today to resupply and stuff. You can get on that and go to the rear and seek some medical attention. So I did that. Well, that night, we were working with some APCs at that time too. So that night, they were going to make an encampment again. And my friend Phil, who I usually walked close by, and the rest of our platoon, they figured the best place to be walking is in the track of the APC. Because if there were some mines, they would set them off. So I remember my buddy Phil saying he was walking, and the armored personnel carriers were making a big circle, and he was still walking on that track, and a guy got off of that. He jumped off of that APC and land right on a huge mine. That guy was gone in an instant. My friend Phil, who was one of the closest guys, thought he was dead. Because all he could, when he kind of came to, all he could see was this green, billowing smoke. And he says, I'm in heaven. And he's a good Christian, too. Anyway, he said, I'm in heaven. Well, no, you weren't in heaven, Phil. What happened was the shrapnel hit some smoke grenades he had on him, but he was wounded really, really bad from his legs down. Even to this day, he does not have any calf muscles at all. His leg, he wears braces on his legs. Well, they got choppers in, and there was 6 or 7 other guys from my squad that were wounded too. So I said, God, you did it again. I wasn't out there. So the next day, the hospital wasn't too far away from where we were. I got in a Jeep and I went over there, and wow, Phil wasn't looking too good. They had his legs all bandaged up, probably this big, and still didn't look good. And Lieutenant tells me to come over by him, and he says, and he had a really bad wound in his arm. And they said, Phil, they told me that if I can't move my fingers tomorrow morning, they're going to take my arm off. And let's just pray that don't happen. Well, anyway, I said goodbye to him. Next morning, I went back over there, and the lieutenant, he's yelling at me first, get over here, come here, come here. He says, look at this. And he's moving he said, I stayed up all night. Said, mine, move those fingers. To this day, he can't straighten his arm out. He can only straighten it about this far, but he's got complete use of his hand and everything. And once again, I wasn't out in the field. And so that's just some of the examples how God had his hand on me so many times. So prayer is a wonderful thing. Don't ever give up not praying for somebody. If somebody gives you a need, pray. Pray. It might not be an instant answer to prayer, but you got to pray. You got to keep praying. We got a great God. Amen. If people only knew how great God is, I just can't believe people don't believe in God, but that's their choice, and they're going to pay for it someday in a bad way. I know tomorrow is Memorial Day, and there's a lot of things that it's to remember all the veterans, not only men but women. We had women over in Vietnam too as nurses and different things, and some of those passed away over there too. But anyway, it's a day of remembering. So I got just a little reading here of a few things. It just only take me a couple minutes and I'll be finished. Just a remembrance here. 58,267 guys and women died in Vietnam. 5 soldiers on the wall are 16 years old. Okay. 1 soldier is PFC Dan Bullock was 15 years old. Now you go, how in the world could he? Well, from what I've understood about this guy, he looked like he could have been 20. So he must have just faked his way through. Here is some kind of staggering information. 997 soldiers were killed on their first day in the field in Vietnam. 997. 1,448 were killed on their last day in the field in Vietnam. 31 sets of brothers are on the wall. 31 sets of parents lost 2 of their sons. 8 women are on the wall. 244 soldiers were awarded the Medal of Honor in Vietnam. The most casualty deaths for a single day was January 31st, 1968. 245 soldiers gave their lives. The most casualties in a single month was in May of 1968. 2,415 casualties incurred that month. I really want to thank you for giving me this privilege of coming and talking to you today and just letting you know, like I said, don't give up. Keep praying. We got a great God. Thank you for having me.